Welcome, friend. I'm James, your host, and today, we're diving into another captivating episode. Grab a drink, get comfortable, and get ready for a powerful story that's sure to resonate. If something hits home, share your thoughts in the comments. Let's dive in. Title: The Night My Friend's LA Life Fell Apart, and Why She's Never Been the Same Since. Alright, buckle up because this story has everything: heartbreak, betrayal, and the kind of drama that would make reality TV producers foam at the mouth. I'm talking about a friend of mine. We'll call her Kelly. Obviously, that's not her real name, but she's one of those girls who lives a life so messy, yet so captivating, that you can't look away. She went from picture-perfect housewife to something else entirely, all because of one fateful night in Los Angeles. And honestly, you wouldn't believe how fast everything changed for her. One minute she was living the suburban dream, and the next, she was caught up in a whirlwind of secrecy and dangerous thrills, the kind of stuff that happens in those movies where you keep asking yourself, how did it all go so wrong? It's the kind of transformation that doesn't just happen overnight, except, in Kelly's case, it sort of did. It was a shift that began slowly, unnoticed by anyone, and then, like a crack in a dam, exploded into a flood that swept away the life she once knew. From fairy tale to financial nightmare, Kelly had always been the kind of girl who fell for the fairy tale, the type of romantic who believed in happily ever afters and once-in-a-lifetime love. Raised in a small town where people still left their doors unlocked and everyone waved at each other on the street, she had grown up with a picture of what life was supposed to be: simple, happy, filled with laughter and love. But life in LA was a far cry from her quaint upbringing, and that naivety was something she carried with her when she moved to the city for college. Her appearance reflected that small-town charm: dirty blonde hair that fell in loose waves down her back, skin that always looked sun-kissed no matter the season, and blue eyes that sparkled with a mixture of curiosity and innocence. She wasn't just a pretty face, she had a warmth about her that drew people in. It was hard not to like her, and she made friends easily, though she often remained guarded, careful not to let anyone see the parts of her she wasn't proud of. Kelly's life took a turn when she met Tom during her freshman year. He was everything she thought she wanted: older, worldly, ambitious. Tall and athletic with a casual swagger, Tom was the kind of guy who could walk into a room and command attention without saying a word. There was a confidence in his every move, a self-assuredness that made him seem invincible. To Kelly, he was like one of those movie heroes who always knew what to do and how to do it. Being with him made her feel like she was living in a different story, one where she was the leading lady, and everything was going to be okay. Tom had swept her off her feet almost literally. He'd make a show of scooping her up and carrying her into his apartment, playfully twirling her around like she was weightless. He told her everything she wanted to hear, about how he'd take care of her, about how they'd build a beautiful life together. Kelly was captivated. Before she knew it, she was agreeing to drop out of college when Tom said his new job could support them both. It was an easy choice for her. After all, what did she need with a degree when she had a man who seemed to have everything figured out? For the next year, she played the role of the perfect girlfriend, soon-to-be fiancée, then wife, pouring all her energy into building a life for them. The wedding was like something out of a magazine, flower petals drifting through the air as she walked down the aisle in a white lace gown, her parents crying tears of joy as Tom's eyes shone with pride. The pictures from that day still hung in their house, silent witnesses to the promises that were made and broken. They moved into a charming little bungalow in West LA, with a white picket fence and flower boxes filled with Kelly's carefully tended blooms. Inside, she had decorated every corner with a meticulous touch. Everything had a place, everything was perfect. At least, that's what she kept telling herself. For a while, things were great. Tom's job seemed solid, their relationship was passionate, and they became that couple that everyone wanted to be around. They hosted dinner parties, took spontaneous road trips up the coast, and lived what looked like a picture-perfect LA lifestyle. But the cracks began to show when Tom's great job turned out to be anything but secure. It was commission-based, and the market was unforgiving. Kelly noticed little changes at first, the way Tom's jaw would tense when he opened the mail, the nights he'd stay out later and later under the pretense of networking. She didn't think too much of it, brushing off her own suspicions as paranoia. But then, the day came when the truth finally hit her like a cold slap in the face. It started small. Tom was late paying a bill, then another, until Kelly found herself anxiously hiding overdue notices in the kitchen drawer just to avoid another argument. When the pandemic struck, it was the final blow. Tom lost his job almost overnight, and their once cozy bungalow became suffocating, filled with the weight of unspoken worries and the harsh reality that they were on the brink of losing everything. Tom finally confessed just how deep in debt they were. Kelly's stomach twisted as she listened to him, her hands shaking. They were drowning, and Tom told her they needed her to start working, even though she had no experience and no idea where to begin. It wasn't just their finances that had collapsed, it was the life she thought they were building together. Kelly's first descent into LA's underworld. Determined to contribute, Kelly embarked on her job hunt with a level of optimism that quickly faded. She managed to land a job at a trendy downtown diner, hoping the hip atmosphere would make the transition easier. The place was always buzzing with energy, celebs sipping on espressos, models clicking away on their phones, and the occasional business deal being brokered over brunch. It seemed like a great place to start, and Kelly thought maybe, just maybe, she could find her stride. But the chaos was overwhelming. Orders were constantly coming in, the kitchen staff shouted over the sound of clattering dishes, and the manager's eyes always seemed to be watching, ready to catch her slip up. Her first week was a disaster. On her third day, she spilled a tray of drinks down the back of an impatient customer. The red wine stained his shirt, and the man berated her for what felt like hours while Kelly's face burned with humiliation. It didn't get much better after that. She fumbled orders, forgot to refill coffee cups, and dropped cutlery in a constant symphony of clatters. Eventually, the manager pulled her aside and told her they'd have to let her go. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She walked home in a daze, her legs feeling like they could barely carry her as she made her way back to the bungalow that had started to feel more like a prison. Tom's expression when she told him was enough to break her. She could see the frustration in his eyes, though he tried to hide it with a forced smile and a reassuring pat on her shoulder. Next, she tried bartending. A friend of a friend got her a gig at a rooftop bar in downtown LA, a place that oozed exclusivity and style. With glass walls that provided a panoramic view of the city's glittering skyline, it was the kind of spot where people came to be seen. The shift from serving food to mixing drinks seemed like it might be a welcome change, at least until Kelly found herself behind the bar, staring down a line of customers demanding intricate cocktails she had no idea how to make. She botched drink orders left and right, spilling more than she poured. Her coworkers started giving her side-eye, and her manager's patience wore thin in a matter of weeks. The final straw came when she accidentally knocked over an entire row of bottles. Glass shattered everywhere, and a hush fell over the bar. She was fired on the spot. But this time, she didn't tell Tom. She couldn't bear to see that look in his eyes again, the silent disappointment that cut deeper than any words could. She started working odd shifts wherever she could get hired, eventually landing a bartending gig at a Hollywood strip club. The place was a far cry from the sleek rooftop bar. It was dark, gritty, with neon lights casting harsh glows across the room and an air thick with smoke and desperation. Kelly hated every minute of it, the skimpy uniform that felt like a costume, the way men leered at her from across the bar, the customers who crossed the line more often than not. But at least it was work, and she needed the money. The sugar daddy suggestion. Kelly's new friends at the club had seen it all before, girls whose lives had gone sideways, girls who were used to picking up the pieces no matter how many times they shattered. One night, as she sat in the break room fighting back tears after yet another rough shift, a dancer named Jess sat down beside her. "You know," she said with a knowing look, "there are other ways to make money." Kelly sniffled, looking at Jess through swollen eyes. "Like what?" she asked. Jess didn't hesitate. "A sugar daddy," she replied nonchalantly, like she was suggesting Kelly try a new hobby. Jess leaned in closer, her voice low but full of conviction. It's not what you think. A lot of the time, they just want someone to take to fancy dinners or business events. They pay well, sometimes better than these crappy shifts. She glanced around the break room, the dim lighting casting shadows on the stained walls, as if to emphasize the point. You're a pretty girl, Kelly, she continued. You've got that innocent look that men go crazy for. You do great. At first, Kelly scoffed at the idea. The term sugar daddy brought to mind images of sleazy older men pawing at young girls, a lifestyle that seemed seedy and far removed from the kind of life she had always imagined for herself. She had grown up thinking that being a sugar baby was just a step above something illicit, and she still clung to the belief that she was better than that. But as Jess kept talking, the reality of her own situation started to sink in. There was no escaping it. She was desperate. The bills kept piling up, the eviction notices weren't going to disappear, and Tom was already growing distant. The longer she struggled, the more tempting Jess's suggestion became. It wasn't like she hadn't already traded a bit of her dignity for a paycheck by working at the strip club. How much worse could it be to play the part of a companion for a few hours here and there? One night, after opening another overdue bill that she had no way to pay, Kelly's resolve broke. She called Jess, who eagerly set her up with a connection. Her first meeting was at a swanky Beverly Hills restaurant, the kind of place where chandeliers sparkled like diamonds and the menu didn't have prices. Her date was a retired tech executive, mid-60s, graying at the temples but still in shape, wearing an expensive suit that fit him like a glove. He greeted her warmly, pulling out her chair and ordering a bottle of wine without hesitation. I just need someone to keep me company, he said with a reassuring smile. I'm not looking for anything physical, just some companionship. It gets lonely, you know? Kelly nodded, forcing herself to smile as she listened to him ramble on about his golden years in Silicon Valley, the luxury cars he used to own, the properties scattered across the country. As the evening wore on, she found herself relaxing. This wasn't so bad, just making small talk over an extravagant dinner, letting him feel like the most interesting man in the world for a few hours. And when he slipped an envelope into her purse at the end of the night, she was astonished by the amount of cash inside. It was more than she made in a week at the club. A taste of the high life. With that first taste of easy money, Kelly's life took another turn. The cash helped to alleviate the financial pressure, and for the first time in months, she wasn't panicking every time she heard the mailbox clang shut. She found herself going out on dates several times a month, lavish dinners, art gallery openings, even a weekend in Palm Springs. Her wardrobe expanded to include designer dresses and high-end heels, outfits that made her look like she belonged in the places she was frequenting. The first sugar daddy, as promised, kept things strictly platonic. He seemed genuinely grateful for her company, happy to have someone listen to his stories. Kelly began to enjoy playing the role of the charming, young companion. She found herself slipping into the character more easily than she would have liked, sometimes even convincing herself that she was living the kind of glamorous life she had once fantasized about. But then she met the second sugar daddy, a charming, impeccably dressed investment banker in his early 40s, who took her to all the right places and said all the right things. At first, it was no different from the other dates. They shared laughs over champagne, he regaled her with stories about his jet-setting lifestyle, and she played the part of the attentive listener. But there was an undercurrent to their encounters, an unspoken tension that simmered just below the surface. She noticed the way his eyes lingered on her, the subtle touches on her arm, the suggestive tone that slipped into his compliments. She knew where it was headed, even if she didn't want to admit it. One night, after a particularly extravagant dinner, he leaned in close as they walked out of the restaurant and kissed her, his lips warm and insistent against hers. Kelly felt a jolt of electricity course through her, a dangerous thrill that mixed with the sudden wave of guilt that flooded her senses. She had crossed a line. It wasn't just a game anymore, it wasn't just harmless flirting or playing dress-up in the real world. She went home to Tom that night, her mind spinning, her skin still tingling from the kiss. She couldn't look him in the eye as she changed into her pajamas and slid into bed beside him. The next day, Kelly texted the investment banker to tell him she couldn't continue seeing him. "I'm married," she typed out, her hands trembling. "I can't cheat on my husband." But the words felt hollow, even to her. Part of her had already accepted that she was living a double life, a life that didn't match the sweet, innocent girl she used to be. The anniversary that changed everything. As her 4th anniversary with Tom approached, Kelly felt an overwhelming need to make things special. It wasn't just about the milestone, it was about trying to rekindle something that had faded. Their marriage had been drifting for a while, lost in the fog of financial stress and silent resentment. Kelly thought that if she could remind Tom of the passion they once had, maybe they could find their way back to each other. So, she took some of the money she'd earned from the sugar daddies and bought a stunning black dress, the kind that clung to her curves in all the right places and shimmered under the light. She booked a reservation at Tom's favorite upscale Italian restaurant downtown, where they had celebrated their first wedding anniversary. She was going to surprise him at his office, dressed to the nines and ready to sweep him off his feet. But when she arrived at the office, things didn't go as planned. The receptionist told her that Tom was still in a meeting and suggested she wait in the lobby. Kelly perched on the edge of a leather chair, fidgeting with the hem of her dress, glancing anxiously at the clock. Minutes ticked by, stretching into what felt like hours. She could feel her excitement slipping away, replaced by a growing sense of doubt. Had she miscalculated? Did Tom even care about anniversaries anymore? It was then that fate, or perhaps misfortune, stepped in. She heard a familiar voice call her name and turned to see the investment banker, her second sugar daddy, striding across the lobby. He looked surprised, then amused. "Kelly," he said with a sly smile, "what are the odds?" He glanced her up and down, his eyes lingering on the curves of her dress. "You look incredible," he added, stepping closer. "You here for me?" Kelly opened her mouth to say something, to brush him off, but the words died in her throat. She wasn't sure if it was the way he looked at her, with that mixture of desire and admiration, or if it was the fact that Tom still hadn't finished his meeting. But when the banker suggested they grab a drink in his office while she waited, she agreed without thinking. One drink turned into 2, and as the alcohol began to loosen her inhibitions, she found herself leaning closer to him, laughing at his jokes, and forgetting for a moment why she had even come there in the first place. The air was charged, and before she knew it, his lips were on hers again, more insistent this time, his hands roaming down her back, pulling her close. Crossing the line, Kelly knew she should stop him. She knew she should push him away and walk out the door, go find Tom and pretend none of this ever happened. But instead, she let herself get swept up in the moment, let the thrill of doing something forbidden consume her. As they kissed, the investment banker led her to his desk, guiding her backwards until she felt the cold edge of it press against her thighs. His hand slid up the sides of her dress, pulling it higher, while Kelly's heart raced. She told herself it was just one mistake, one moment of weakness, but deep down, she knew it was more than that. It wasn't just about the banker or the kiss or even the thrill of doing something she shouldn't. It was about a part of her that had been buried for too long, a hunger she had kept suppressed, now clawing its way to the surface. Before she knew it, she was bent over his desk, her dress hiked up, her body pressed against his as he took her from behind. The intensity of it was like nothing she had ever felt with Tom. It was raw, urgent, and she could feel herself unraveling with every thrust. When it was over, the banker pulled away, leaving Kelly breathless and trembling. She quickly gathered her things, smoothing her dress back into place as she caught a glimpse of herself in the glass reflection of the office. Her hair was disheveled, her lipstick smudged, and she had 20 missed calls from Tom. "Oh God," she muttered under her breath, snatching up her purse and practically sprinting out of the office. She ran into Tom in the lobby, who looked both relieved and annoyed at the same time.